My name is Ben, this is Board Game Dad, and today we're talking about the 2 to 4 player game by Comet Games, Wondrous Creatures. Now, this is a review, so I will be telling you my opinion on the game. However, this is a prototype copy provided by Comet, and as such, I won't give you my final thoughts on the game because the game is not final. But instead, I'm going to be focusing on whether or not this is the kind of game that you would like to back on Kickstarter, which is now open, and you can find links in the description. But with that purpose in mind, I'm going to be talking about 3 things about this game that I'm very excited about, as well as 3 pieces of feedback that I gave the publishers. But first, let's talk about how to play Wondrous Creatures. So here we have Wondrous Creatures set up for 2 players, and in order to fit the frame of the video, I've turned the board sideways. This is actually the top, and this is the bottom, and each player is going to have their own player board. Now, if you're familiar with the game Everdell, as you're looking at this, you could be helpful to think about this like Everdell, because we do have a market of cards that are available for players to pick up and put into their hand. They're going to be building those in a tableau along their player board during the game. And then here is a map, which is also where players are going to be putting their workers, or what they call the crew in this game, in order to collect resources. And then we also have a section of the board that is for objectives or achievements that can be earned during the game. And then finally on the board, there's spaces printed for the supply. So we have all of that. Now, in addition to elements that would be familiar to players of Everdell, we also have these trophies. These trophies signify the immediate end of the game. Or rather, when the last trophy is taken, every player gets one more turn. And that's going to happen no matter how far you've moved on the time track here. However, if a player does get to the end of the time track, it immediately removes the last trophy, and the end of the game can be triggered that way as well. I'd like to also point out how this game can vary from game to game. First, we have these objective cards. So there are 3 types of objectives, and there are several other cards that can be dealt into these areas for objectives in the game. That's always different. Also, the eggs that you see on the board, these are going to be in different spaces each time you play the game. And then the player boards, there's some variability here. So this card can be added to a player board, and it can be swapped out with any of the other captains over here, which I've put on display. And when you take a captain, it also modifies one of your game pieces. So I've got Samuel here on my piece, but this could be exchanged with any other captain. Let's now talk about gameplay. So a game of Wondrous Creatures is going to be played with players taking turns to perform one of 4 basic actions. So the first basic action is going to be placing a crew onto the board here. We're going to talk about that more in depth in a little bit. The second basic action is to play from your hand up to 2 cards. The third action is to claim one of these achievements. And then finally, the fourth action is to use your turn to recharge. So let's go over those 4 actions one at a time. So let's talk about placing a crew. You'll notice that every player's crew pieces are large enough that they cover 2 spaces when placed on the board, 2 hexes. Now, there are several different types of hexes. All players have access to these clearings here. But some players have a special ability on their player board to place their crew on another terrain type. So I have the ability to place my crew on islands. So I could place mine right here. Now, when I do that, if I cover any eggs, I can pick those up and put them on my player board. The spaces on my player board are numbered, so I have to start with 1 and add them in increasing order. We're going to talk about the significance of eggs later when we talk about achievements. But for now, let's talk about the effects of placing this crew. I am going to be able to pick up resources from all of the adjacent habitats to the spaces where my crew is. So I'm adjacent to this purple area, this yellow area, and this green area. Now there are two types of resources. There are the food that come from those areas. So let's see, I might want to take the green food and the yellow food. But then for the purple habitat, instead of taking the food, maybe instead I'll take the other type of resource, which is cards. All of the creature cards are associated with a specific habitat. So if I was interested in this card, I could take it because it comes from the purple habitat. The other ones on here, we have the blue habitat and a yellow habitat. But I'll take this card and I'm going to add it to my hand. That's it for the basic action of placing a crew. That would be the end of my turn. You might still be wondering about the captain. We're going to talk about that a little later when we talk about free actions. The next action is playing up to 2 cards. And those cards are going to be coming from your hand, and there are many different cards in this game. In fact, the entire deck is full of distinct cards. So we're not going to go over what all of the cards do, but we will go over the basic card anatomy. So we take a look at this card, and it has the habitat that it comes from. It has the type of creature that it is. It has its cost along the side here. It has an effect, which could be of many different types. This is an instantaneous effect. And then finally it has victory point value, or at least it often does. You can see this card doesn't have any victory points, but it's an end of game card that will give me points if I satisfy this condition. It also has 2 animal types. We're going to be talking about these animal types when we get to achievements. Anyway, I can play up to 2 cards on my turn, and I want to make sure that I can afford it. So if I look at these 2, it's going to cost me 2 green, 1 blue, and a total of 2 purple in order to take both of these cards and add them to my tableau. And that would be the turn for playing up to 2 cards. The next basic action is claiming one of these achievements. If I wanted to claim, let's say, this achievement, it's looking for creatures that have at least 7 fish and reptiles. So that can be any combination. So I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and I almost have enough for that 7. So that's where the eggs come in. I can get that extra fish from the egg on my player board, but whereas these I'm always going to have, once I've used the egg, I have to flip it over. So I flip over this egg. That will be my 7th creature of this type. And what I can do is I can claim that trophy. It means I'm going to choose one of my player markers, and any player marker that I use is going to give me a special benefit. So I can be strategic about this to get the benefit that I really want. In any case, I would take that and put it up here, and I will get my award from my player board, so I guess I'll take some blue. And then the trophy is going to be added down here. That also gets us 1 trophy closer to the end of the game. The last basic action is to recharge. So for this, I had to jump ahead again. I now have all of my crew on the board, and what I want to do is bring them all back. Then you're going to advance on the time track up here, and that's going to release a few new refresh tokens. So this tells me where additional eggs are going to go. It's saying that I'm going to put a new egg drawn from the bag on all spaces with a square. So there's going to be 3 spaces that match. Now, I also have 2 new tokens which are going to create new actions on the board. Any of these spaces that have an icon on them have a special action which we haven't talked about yet. But I can go ahead and upgrade one so that it becomes a little bit more powerful. That's it for the 4 basic actions. However, there are still a few more game elements that I've been saving until now. These are the free actions. So one free action uses one of these net tokens that you begin the game with and which you can pick up as you continue to score in-game points. By spending a net, I can, in addition to picking up my normal resources, collect an adjacent egg. Normally you can only take eggs that you're directly on top of. I could take an egg, or if I didn't want the egg, I could also perform one of the additional actions on some of these spaces. So for example, this one allows me to take one more purple resource, one more mushroom. I could use that for the cost of a net, and that's for free. I can do that with any of my workers on the board, and it's very useful for when you have a card that you really want to play, but you're only missing one more resource. So we've got the net. The next thing is concerning special cards like this. Some cards are going to let you put energy tokens on them, and as a free action during your turn, you can discard one of the energy to perform the special effect for that card. That's a free action. And then lastly, there's upgrading your player board. So this also concerns the captain crew member. During the game, once I've placed my second creature, I can slide this up to show that I've finished that task, and I now gain a special ability. This is going to be a different ability for each captain, but now it says that, as an example, whenever I place my captain, I'm going to get 1 in-game point for every trophy that I've earned so far. So if I was to place this on the board, even from my example, because I have 1 trophy, I would immediately earn 1 victory point. Okay? The second one on here is going to be achievable once you've placed 2 of your markers. I've actually already placed 2 markers, so I've achieved that. And this is what gives you the ability to place on islands. So that's it for the rules, but there is so much more to unlock in the game, as so much more is included in all of these unique cards. You have cards that give you special abilities, all sorts of one-time effects. We've got the energy effects. There's just a lot to do, and really it's going to depend on what cards you pick up during the course of the game. That's how Wondrous Creatures is played, but is this the kind of game that you'll want to back on Kickstarter? Well, to describe how a game feels, I usually use the Perfect Boardgame formula, which is 5 attributes that describe a game's profile. These aren't my opinion on how much I like the game, but rather my analysis on the game's dominant characteristics, on its theme, mechanics, components, strategy, and complexity. If you'd like to learn more about that, you can check out my links in the description below, where I also have the Perfect Boardgame quiz, where you can find out your Perfect Boardgame formula using the games that you like as examples. Anyway, for Wondrous Creatures, what stands out about this game more than anything else is definitely its Wondrous Creatures, the fantastic artwork and imaginative creatures and names. The game is simply beautiful. But not only that, it also has a fun and engaging mechanic, which is medium weight in its complexity. So for that reason, the game would have very high mechanics and component scores, whereas it would have an average or even low complexity, strategy, and theme score. Now, that being said, there are 3 things about this game that I am very excited about, and 3 pieces of feedback that I have for bad comment. Things I'm excited about: number 1. You heard in my rules teach that I made a reference to Everdell. Well, one thing that this game does differently and that I love about it is that in Wondrous Creatures, the game terminates for everyone all at the same time. But the thing with a game like this is that because of the card kind of engine building mechanic, it's very difficult to stop. You know, it's the kind of game where you're hoping that the game doesn't end. Now, sometimes what designers do is they have like a game end condition that somebody can just surprise you. You know, they come from out of nowhere and suddenly the game is over for everyone and everyone goes, oh no, I wasn't ready, right? But by using this trophy thing, it puts an end at the game so that it doesn't go too long, but it gives everybody a fair warning so that they can prepare their strategy for the inevitable end of the game. And I really, really like how that's done here. Not only that, but if players don't go for trophies, you also have the round counter, which will remove the trophies. So in either case, the game is going to end, and it's going to end for everyone. Second thing, I always get excited when I find a unique new mechanic, something that I've never seen before. And this worker placement in a map where the worker covers 2 spaces is a brilliant new idea. It creates so much flexibility and so many options for players, because rather than have a space that, you know, always gives you the same resources, you're going to be able to find something, or you can try to find something that satisfies exactly what you need. I think that offers a lot of creativity for players, and I really like that. I've never seen it before. Maybe it exists. I haven't played every game, but this seemed new to me, and it really stood out. I like it a lot. And then finally, but of little surprise, is the game's wonderful artwork. Now, for me, I'm often very skeptical of games with great components because it makes me question, does the game actually have any substance? Is the game actually fun? And I think that Wondrous Creatures is very fun. I think it's very engaging, and because it is, the components are that much more satisfying. And I think what adds to it is the 5 types of cards. You've got the instant effects, the continuous effects, in-game, the cards that are active during the recharge phase, and the energy type cards. Now, those card types, I've seen cards like that in other games before. Nothing extremely unique there, but it really enables players to enjoy finding how they're going to get synergy between all of their cards. That's always a lot of fun. The game is well designed in that regard, and I'm excited about it. I do have 3 pieces of feedback, however, and the first concerns those magnetic captain pieces. Those are up front and center for all of the photographs of this game, but when it comes to gameplay, that feature is purely aesthetic, at least in the prototype. And I'd really like to see those magnets being used in gameplay. I think there's a lot of potential to have them be more than just decorations for your meeples. For example, it'd be cool if at some point during the game the magnetic piece would have to come off. That would actually give necessity to the magnet. Or, the game as it is right now, all of the player boards are identical. So the only variation among players is the captain that varies from player to player in that magnetic piece. It would be very cool if the player boards were also distinct so that you could have combinations of player board and captain working together. I would love to see that. I'm not sure if they're going to do that or not, but I do think that there is a lot of potential from there, and I have been assured that there are going to be changes being made, especially to the player powers. The next thing has to do with the pacing of the game. I've played this game both 2-player and 4-player, and I found that the pacing of a 2-player game was very thrilling. It was a great pace, and I think the reason is in a 2-player game, as you're refreshing the map with more eggs, there are fewer players for all of those eggs to be passed around. And as a result, players have more chances to use eggs to satisfy objectives and earn trophies. That makes the pace of the game a little quicker. Whereas in a 4-player game, there's more people to share those eggs. And as a result, players use fewer eggs to claim objectives, and it slows the game down a little bit. Now, I think of all of my feedback, this is the easiest one to fix. You just simply add more eggs in a 4-player game, and that would only just be one suggestion. There's lots of things they could do there. But I did notice a difference in the game's pacing, and I thought it was much better 2-player than 4-player, at least as it is right now. my last piece of feedback is that I wish the game was a little bit more thematically cohesive in the cards' effects. Now, to give you an example of what I mean, I would compare the game to something that most people are familiar with. You look at Wingspan. In Wingspan, you have all of these different bird cards, but then among birds of prey, they all have a very similar card effect. You're drawing cards, you're looking for birds with a smaller wingspan, and you're getting them for victory points. But in Wondrous Creatures, of course, all of the creatures are fantastic, so you don't go into the game with any expectation for how these creatures should behave, but there's no noticeable trend among creatures of the same species. I wish the designers would consider the game's lore and add to it a little bit more story about what each type of creature is and what their card effects are, so that you could have trends among how those cards perform when you get them. I don't think if you said, okay, my strategy is going to be collect mammals, that there would be anything that would be different about how your game goes than if your strategy was to collect reptiles. And I don't think that should be the case. I think that the different animal species should lead you down a different strategic path. And if there is a theme among animals of the same type, it wasn't apparent to me playing the prototype. I've told you a little bit of my concern, and I've told you about my profile. Whether or not this is a game for you, I now leave that decision in your hands. But I hope you found this review helpful. Thank you very much for watching. And a special thank you for everyone who is supporting me on Patreon. You guys enable me to release my honest reviews on board games. Thank you so much for your support. Again, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.